Okay. I have noon. So I believe we can go ahead and start. We want to welcome everybody to the KPQC October 2021 Learning Forum. Before we start, I would like to go over just a few housekeeping details with you. Again, if you didn't hear my little speech a little bit ago, if you could please put your name and your agency into the chat box. That way we can get an accurate reflection of who's present today. We would greatly appreciate it. Please keep your phone or speaker on mute. We have unmuted everybody, so please keep yourself muted unless you would like to ask a question, just to cut back on background noise. During the question or presentation, if you do have any questions, please feel free to use the chat. We will be monitoring that very closely. And then again, today's call will be recorded. So you will receive an email with the presentation, any additional resources, and the recording will be posted to the website, and we will send out an email with all those links in about a week. Without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Tara. Give me 1 second, Tara. Trying to get my thing here.
Our slideshow just changed.
It did.
Okay.
Hold on, guys. I'm sorry.
Yes, it sure did. Now we can see everybody. I think there's the one thing that actually came out of this whole situation.
Well, I think, Tara, in the interest of time, can I just advance your slides for you?
Of course you can.
Okay.
You can go old school any day you want to go old school. It's totally fine.
We'll go old school.
Okay.
So, oops, let me get back here. All right.
I do not see slides. We just see the participants still.
Okay.
Well, we must have stopped sharing our screen is what we must have done.
Hey, there see
it.
Oh, and I think I can pass it to you, Tara. I am
the
so
power
sorry.
of Zoom. You guys don't worry, you're doing a great job. So for everybody on the call, which by the way, the fact that there are 37 plus of us means that the transition is going really well, because we were kind of concerned that nobody was going to find us this month, and you're all here. So big announcement, and then we're going to get rolling because we have a really, really great guest speaker that you all will recognize. And so we brought her back for round 2. We are officially AIM enrolled. So this is like the carrot that we keep dangling for you all, and the excitement that the state had regarding our next steps to improve maternal health in Kansas. And sure enough, Casey got the call nearly 2 weeks ago, perhaps even 2.5 weeks ago, that Kansas was officially enrolled as an AIM state. Let me see if I can advance the slides here and make this happen. Tell you a little bit more about that. And go.
Oh, I think we gave you control. Did it not work?
Yeah, I mean,
There you go.
Okay.
it's okay. It's okay. The babies come out. That's what I always say. Okay. So the postpartum discharge transition is the official name for the AIM bundle that we have enrolled in. This is just a snapshot of the website, you guys, where you can go and literally dig deep into the 5 R's of the postpartum discharge transition plan. The website that Casey just posted in the chat, which is also at the top there, again, gives all the specifics about this AIM bundle that you all, for those of you that are enrolled as 4 trimester sites, are now intricately involved in. I'm thrilled. I'm excited. Quite frankly, we're already doing the things that are on this transition bundle. We had a preview, remember, and so we started to embed and process and integrate before we were even official. But good news is that we now have the official bundle. We're in, and we're marching forward. Also, I'm going to actually have Casey come on just for a second and tell you about a really exciting project that, as we continue to get process improvement going in Kansas and to improve maternal health, ongoing projects are embedded to improve the overall process. Casey, you want to jump on and explain the MAVIS project?
Sure, I don't have too many details right now because we literally just got the notification a couple weeks ago. So this project just recently kicked off. But the goal of it will be to offer training across all sectors across the state with the KPQC as well as other MCH partners and community partners as well. So more information to come on this, but we're pretty excited about it.
Unmute. Mavis Project is again something that we identified. Actually, it's a success story of a bad outcome as part of the red flags in Kansas and the areas that needed our attention. And so Mavis Project is one of the answers to that specific concern. Again, pay attention here, Kansas. We're ahead, and we just need to make change happen. One of the things that hit me, I just want to put in front of you all today is this statistic. As we talk about the immediate postpartum period and our focus in on that time, let's be honest with ourselves and know that what happens outside or after they're discharged, or even perhaps before they get to us in the labor and birth setting, is significant. And please remember that from our KCC partners, this important quote: more than 50% of women who die of self-harm sought help at a hospital or emergency department within 1 month of their death. So as we talk about with our teams in the inpatient and birth center settings about red flags for maternal mental health or cardiovascular illness or breastfeeding, that you have to remember that whatever we do to empower them to seek help before, during, and after their birth experience is tremendously important. And this statistic makes us want to do more faster. Also a reminder about what's going on in the state. Mallory and Carrie, two of our 4 trimester champions from the Kansas City area, are working really hard to get high quality education out into the rural settings. And the 4 things that are mentioned there are just a smattering of their menu for what rural hospitals and other hospitals can choose to receive in terms of education from them. They come out to the setting, walk you through great education and drills, on-site training, phenomenal options. I'm going to push them and perhaps embed myself in their process improvement with post-birth part 1, cardiovascular events in the postpartum setting. I think we've got to focus in on the conversation of hypertensive crisis, hypertensive disorders, and recognizing it across all settings in the postpartum period. And so Mallory and Carrie are doing great work. And I wanted you all to know that they are wonderful resources to use at your own facilities. It's pretty cool that they're 4 trimester champions as well. Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition, again, we're just sharing good news today. The latest information came out from MPINK scores, which, if you know anything, that's kind of a way for Kansas to assess itself and breastfeeding rates and process development, but it's also a way to compare Kansas to all the other states in the nation. And sure enough, we are 13th on the national ranking, up from 22nd in 2018, which is wonderful. Brenda's saying woohoo. Yeah, hard work on their behalf. Congratulations, Brenda. Also know that there's some specifics in there. We did score higher on our scores than 3 out of the 4 neighboring states. I'm a little competitive, so this was the part that drew me in right away. Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Missouri. See you later. Colorado, we're coming for you. Is how I read that. Next step, of course, is that each of you in your hospital and birth center settings is probably aware of the High Five Initiative, certainly Baby Friendly. Our Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition folks are teaming up with first trimester work. For those of you that are already integrated with breastfeeding resources, we're going to bolster that or add to it or help with the other side of that. We certainly want to get those of you that aren't enrolled or participating in High Five for Mom and Baby or Baby Friendly to become embedded and enrolled, and excited about those processes. But for right now, we're celebrating with the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition. Phenomenal work coming out of that group. And again, we're beating the competition. So makes us feel good. Post-birth check-in. Remember, every time I use the acronym post-birth, it's all caps on purpose. That stands for a very specific acronym of red flags that we need to teach our moms and support systems in the postpartum period. Each of those red flags, some are yellow flags, some are red flags for folks to watch for and to seek help or to seek attention or an appointment in the postpartum setting. I want you to get used to the term post-birth. I want you to be able to recite what post-birth stands for. And I want every patient and support system across Kansas eventually to know and recognize all of the symptoms and red flags noted in the post-birth acronym. That's our goal. Well, the problem with that is we throw post-birth education at our 4th trimester sites and tell you to do the A1 training and then we're going to send you magnets. But really, to be fair, we have to talk about how did the process improvement really happen? It happens by education around post-birth. Learn the acronym, learn why they're important, understand the education for yourself, and then be able to integrate it in education with your patients and their support systems. Follow up to that is the integration plan, right? How do we integrate this new content into what we're already doing, improve the process, start the process, et cetera. And the document that I sent out last week will walk you through that exact thing. There are 3 steps mentioned here. This is a process improvement collaboration between the Maternal Child Health Division at KPQC as well as 4th trimester work. So it's simultaneously happening in the outpatient setting as well as the inpatient setting, that we're all doing the same content, the same language, and integrating it into our policies and procedures so that no wrong door happens for a woman or her support folks. Again, this document's hugely important to know how to embed, change your policy, and to use the resources that A1 and 4th trimester has to make that happen. Those of you that are enrolled, your to-do list is simply the same. Again, we don't need to spend much time on this. You know what's happening. And if you don't, you're doing awesome at reaching out to me saying, hey, Tara, remind me what we need to do next and where we're at. So again, we're working on the post-birth training across the board in our 4th trimester sites. Many maternal child health folks are also doing so and beginning to have same language, same goal. Our maternal mental health buddies at KCC are working with our 8 specific TA sites, doing fast forward work to get a process improvement going there for maternal mental health screening and referral. And those of us that are non-TA sites, we're reviewing our policies, we're reaching out to KCC with any concerns, but stay tuned. Those sites that are the chosen 8 will help the rest of us integrate, evaluate, and embed very soon after the new year. Always got to remind you about the annoying documentation. Yes, I'm that person. The 4th trimester enrollee checklist is just my way of keeping track where each site is in the process. It's also a way for you to keep track of where you are in the 4th trimester process. And so that's why that checklist is important. If you're not sure about the checklist or where you are on the checklist, don't hesitate to reach out and ask good questions. You all know about this site, the free registrations. Each site now has 8. All of the champions have now been through training, which is awesome. We are still working on several sites to get some more folks registered, and then we're going to just throw it out there. We have 199 registrations that have not been tapped into just for 4th trimester alone. So do not hesitate to reach out to me if you need more registrations, or perhaps you're not sure how to use a registration to its utmost. We've got lots of free learning, and we want to embed this as quickly as possible. Always a reminder to integrate your ER and your outpatient settings in your training as much as you can on the front end. We'll encourage that on the back end next year as well. And then magnets. Many of you have asked about the next set of magnets. As soon as you get through your first round of training, your champions train, and you're beginning to embed the education, you should be using your magnets that were sent to you this summer. As you're getting low on those numbers of magnets, do not hesitate. We'll send it to you right away. We probably will send most everybody's out by the end of the year anyway. But if you need it before that, you let me know. Same conversation we had. We're just walking through processes improvement. We're focused in on making, again, the inpatient setting a safer place. We talked about the checklist already. This is the new one you'll get from me before the end of the year. Remember, it's not new, it's updated. So as we continue and increase what we're doing, you'll see additions added. Some of the stuff that you already reported to me is already taken off. So again, just our way of communicating and keeping track of where you are in the process. Ta-da! This is the most important stuff, right? We love it when guest speakers come, especially when folks like Sapphire come for our noon session. For many of you, you recognize her name from across the state for several reasons. I met Sapphire when we started talking on the 4th trimester work with birth equity and racism, and all of the pieces, and there are so many that we're not doing well in Kansas and some that we are doing really well. Sapphire was asked to participate or present today in October because of her strong work on Kansas birth equity. and her interest in speaking to all populations of folks in our state about how we can all do a better job about making birth and the postpartum period more equitable. So without further ado, Sapphire, welcome. We're glad to have you, and I'm going to let you take over the screen.
Thank you. It has not popped up yet.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, it's,
That's okay.
there we go. Hold on one second. It has a little delay.
Our little taskbar at the top decides to disappear and it won't pop back up for us for a minute.
There you go, Sapphire. Sorry. Thank you for your patience.
I may actually have to have you advance these slides because it's not letting me.
Oh, okay. No
Do it.
problem. No problem. There you go. Just tell me next slide and I'll move them for you.
Thank you so much.
You bet.
So I am so excited to talk with you all today because this group of folks has potential to make some major changes in Kansas. And I would like you to take a really close look at the picture right on this intro slide. Does anybody see anything off about it? I'll wait a minute here. If you see something that doesn't seem right, put it in the chat. I'm really curious if you guys are able to see this.
You can also unmute yourselves if you would like to do it that way as well.
It looks like a plastic garbage bag or a grocery bag.
Yes, exactly. So at just first glance, you probably would have believed that that was an iceberg, right? If I hadn't said anything, probably nobody would have questioned it. So I want to open up today by just reminding you that things are not always what they seem. Perception is everything. And the way that we perceive things is so different from person to person. With equity and with questions of systemic racism, it's no different. Perception is everything. And we really are embroiled in it every day of our lives. It can be difficult to take our personal goggles off and see things for what they are. And so today, what I'm hoping to do is to give you some skills and some tools to do that, to give you some additional perspectives to help navigate this really uncomfortable issue that seems to be triggering for almost everybody, regardless of what their ethnicity is. You can advance to the next slide now. So I'm going to start by talking about my different roles just very briefly. So I'm the president and founder of Wichita Birth Justice Society, which is a Black and Brown led 501c3 nonprofit based in Wichita. We are working to make birth equity in the Wichita area a reality. I also am a private doula. You'll see Sapphire's Holistic Doula Services on the screen there. And I also am proud to partner with the Kansas Breastfeeding Coalition. We've created a program called Color-Filled Breastfeeding, and it's a clinical lactation training program that seeks to increase the diversity of lactation professionals in our state. And if you are a clinical site that has not signed up, we can fix that. Get in touch with me. So now that you know what my roles are, I'm actually going to take all of those hats off and put them to the side. And I ask for you to do the same. Today, coming into this space, I want you to know that this is a safe space. And today we are simply all Kansans. I want you to feel safe to share as we go along and to ask any question that comes to your mind. There is no question that's off limits. This space is for all of us to grow and learn together. So take a deep breath with me. We're all going to get through this together. I know it can be really uncomfortable to talk about. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So this quote is one of my favorites. I wanted to open with this today. If you have come here to help me, you are wasting your time. But if you have come because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. And that's by Lila Watson, an activist. I think that this really touches on Kansas's issues and the United States issues as a whole. We are all in it together. You can go to the next slide. So we really are in it all together on the same proverbial ship. If the last couple of years have not taught us anything else, it should be that. What affects one of us affects all of us profoundly. There's no escaping it, and there's no getting away from that truth. You can go ahead and advance to the next. So I'm going to ask you today to consider what your bias is. Consider how your worldview might impact the way that you view other people. So you can see on this illustration here, rose-colored glasses. We all look through rose-colored glasses at the world. We all want to believe that things are on the up and up. We all want to believe that everybody sees things the way that we do, but that's just not the case. So when you're looking at a person represented as an iceberg, an actual iceberg, not a plastic bag this time, you can see certain things, surface details. You see their lifestyle, perhaps. You might see their family structure. You may see signs of conspicuous consumption. You may look at their clothing and decide that they're of a certain social class. There are all of those surface details that we see when we first lay eyes on someone. And as healthcare professionals, when you're looking at somebody and analyzing them, this may be the first thing that you notice, and it's going to color your view of them, regardless of how hard you try to fight it. And so it's important that we all acknowledge that we are looking at the world at large through our own set of glasses, through our own set of goggles. And what you see and I see may not necessarily be the same thing, but we can remove those and look at situations objectively, and we must. Advance the next slide, please. So let's take those glasses off. So this really is a microcosm of the United States. We are all swimming in systemic racism. Again, inescapable. You didn't choose it. I didn't choose it. We were born into it. And just like I didn't choose my ethnicity, you didn't choose yours either. And so the choice that we have is whether we're going to continue to allow systemic racism to be perpetuated. But before we can even make that choice, we really need to acknowledge that it exists. It's all around us. We literally are swimming in it every day of our lives. And if you look at this iceberg here, this is just a simple representation of every individual. The surface details, again, that you see on top really are much different than what you see on the bottom. So previous interactions, historical trauma, fear of losing children, distrust of the system, health literacy changes, and adverse childhood experiences. Can you think of some other details that might impact somebody's lifestyle or somebody's choices or somebody's perception that I haven't listed? If you have some more for me, please drop them in the chat right now. I'll give you a minute to do that. So I don't see any in the chat, but I know that you all are thinking of some in your head. And so I just want you to keep that in mind. Keep in mind that there is so much about every single person that you encounter that you can't see on the surface, that would be impossible to know if they didn't tell you. Every person is so incredibly complex, so much more complex than those surface details. Advance the next slide, please. Oh, we skipped forward one.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. So I'm going to go through a few case studies here. I will tell you that I put an ask out for several folks I know who have given birth in this state in the past couple years. I wanted them to tell their stories. And I was flooded by about, I would say over 30, I didn't count them, people who told me their stories. I picked out the most compelling 4, and I'm going to share those with you today. I think that these are really important for you to hear, to get, again, that perspective. So this first case study was really interesting. The most interesting quote that stood out to me from talking with this mom was when she told me about being discharged. She said, we were getting ready to be discharged. I was completely exhausted and ready to be home. And then the nurse came in and said we weren't free to go. Can anybody guess why that nurse wouldn't let them discharge? You can unmute if you'd like. I know the chat can be kind of hard to pull up while you're watching.
No car seat.
That's a good guess. Anybody
Social
else?
work hold.
Mm-hmm. Yep, bingo. It was a social work hold. And it was completely ridiculous and uncalled for. This woman's younger brother came to visit the baby after the baby was born, and he had been burning some incense in his car and came into the hospital, and the nurse thought that she smelled marijuana. Apparently, this nurse has never smelled marijuana in her life. And so a social work hold was put. And this family was not allowed to leave for about 4 more hours. They were held hostage. They were made to wait. There were thinly veiled threats of taking the baby away, all over a wrong assumption that didn't have to happen. And this one day, this one event, as you can imagine, really set the tone for this mom's postpartum experience. And she said that after that experience, she never wanted to go back to that hospital ever again. Even if her arm was cut off, nobody could get her, nobody could drag her back into that space because she was scared, because she was a Black woman, because she knew firsthand that it was possible to have your child taken away. And she hadn't done anything wrong. Her brother who visited hadn't done anything wrong. But because surface details were relied upon to guide that decision, the wrong decision was made. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we'll move on to case study number 2. This one was really sad. My baby was in the NICU because he was born early. I tried my hardest to go to the hospital every chance I got, but I had to go back to work after 2 weeks. The NICU nurses made me feel unwelcome and even started him on formula without my permission. No one ever asked me how I was feeling or if I was okay. I had nightmares that they were going to take him away from me. I still wake up crying sometimes and have to check his crib to make sure he's still there. This is a whole year after she's had this experience, and the trauma has stuck with her to such a degree that she is literally still waking up crying and needing to make sure that her baby's still there. That is an experience that she had in a Kansas hospital. I won't say which one because this could have been any of them. I've heard this story more than once. We're going to go ahead and move on to the next case study now. So case study number 3. I had problems with my blood pressure this time, and I ended up having an emergency C-section. A week after I finally got home, my incision started to bleed everywhere. I looked in the mirror and saw that the corner had burst open a couple inches. I was so scared. I called my doctor's office, but they couldn't get me in. The nurse on the line didn't seem to believe me. She said if it was that bad, I should go to the ER. By the time they closed my incision up at the ER, I had been waiting 14 hours next to people who had COVID. I ended up catching COVID and was sick for the rest of my maternity leave. I still don't feel 100% okay. So I'm going to stop and ask you, How does that make you feel? Not necessarily as a healthcare provider, but as a human being, hearing this story, how does that make you feel? If any of you would like to unmute to share, I would welcome that. Yeah, I see the chat. I agree. It's extremely sad and it's a shame. It's embarrassing that this is happening in our hospitals in Kansas. And I see your comment. I was furious when I heard this too, Heather. It's extremely upsetting. And there's no excuse. We can go ahead and go to the fourth case study now. The hospital gave us handouts, but I had no idea who to call when I started having shortness of breath 3 days after going home. I called my OB's office and they said it was just anxiety. My husband argued with the nurse on the phone, but she still wouldn't hear me. I am so glad he decided to take me to the ER for a second opinion. It turns out I had a pulmonary embolism. I could have died. This is, again, a true story, and it happened in a Kansas hospital. The ball was dropped. Things like this are happening all the time. And I know that you all probably are just as upset to hear this as I was. The fact that this mother, this young mother with her first child, could have been another statistic. She could have been another number in those that we count for maternal mortality. And there's just no excuse. There's no excuse. So how do we fix it? That's a conversation that we need to have. You can advance the next slide. So what do you notice about this Band-Aid? Again, it's a matter of perception. Does anybody notice anything about that Band-Aid on the screen?
It's one color.
Exactly. Yes. Who was that created for? Who was that created with in mind as far as skin tone? White people. Yeah, that's right, Brenda. It was created for white people. And I think that most folks would never stop and think that there are a million examples of that in society. Something that seems so innocent, right? It's a Band-Aid. So neutral. It seems like it would work for everybody. But when a darker skinned person has it on, it's pretty clear that it wasn't designed for them. So also are the cultural barriers in postpartum care. If something sways towards cultural norms of one culture and not another, then it's not always going to be obvious. If you're somebody from the first cultural group, you aren't necessarily going to notice until you delve in deeper that some things might not fit other populations. And so I want you to keep that in mind. Things are not always what they seem. We can go to the next slide now. So how do we fix that? Equality would say give everybody the same Band-Aid, right? But equity would say give everybody what is the best fit for them. Give everybody what they need. And that is what we need in Kansas. That is what we're asking today, is that you consider equity over equality. And you'll see some statements on this page. These are direct statements from those 4 individuals who were kind enough to share their information for our case studies. The first mom said that what the hospital could have done better was see me and stop assuming. If they had only known that she herself was a healthcare provider, that the house that they were taking that little baby home to was honestly a very nice place to live, nicer probably than most of us could live in. If they had only known that her brother had burned incense. It wasn't marijuana. Then they might have seen the situation different. They might not have traumatized this poor family. The second statement that you'll see on here from that second mom, she wanted you to know that what could have been done different is to treat her with compassion and to understand that her health and well-being matter too, not just her babies. And to listen to her, to ask her how she was doing. The plight of a parent of a NICU baby is not easy. I know that you know that, but consider that she needs care too, that she is a person with her own unique needs too. The third mom had just this very simple statement she wanted to share. Believe me. She just wanted to be believed. She wanted to be heard. She wanted the dignity of being able to pick up the phone and call her doctor's office and know that they cared enough to listen to her concerns. And the ball was dropped. So keep her story in mind. The fourth mom said that she wanted you to know that she is the expert on what's normal for her body. For her body, just like we all are the experts on what's normal for our body. Perception is everything. And there is no doctor, no healthcare provider in the world that has the same perception as the person living in the body. People are not just numbers. People are not just bodies to be treated. They are individuals. They have their own individual needs, wants, wishes, history, and perception. And so allow them to have that dignity. Keep that in mind, that every patient encounter has the potential to make or break this person's perception of their medical care, this person's perception of how well they were cared for during that time in their life. Such an important time. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So this conversation has to continue. It can't stop today. I know this is just a brief conversation a day, just a small snippet of your day, but these conversations have to continue in all of our hospitals, in every facility in Kansas. Every person who is touching a patient should be able to have this conversation comfortably. They should understand how systemic racism affects care. They should understand how to put their own bias to the side and see a person for who they are and ask questions of that person and approach them as a person, not just another patient, not just another number. And so I ask you today, I challenge you to continue this conversation with at least one person. Maybe the person that you talk to equity about is the person at the next desk over. Maybe it's somebody who's in this session with you today. Whoever it is, I want you to have that conversation. We have to keep having these conversations or nothing changes. We can go ahead and move to the next slide. And so I'm going to open up for questions here and comments. And my email is listed there. I want to continue this conversation with anybody who wants to continue it with me. And I'm happy to share more. I'm happy to be a resource to you. So if I can help, please contact me. And I'll open now for questions and comments. I know that all of those case studies were heavy. So again, let's take just a slow breath together. You got through it. We are all getting through this together. Does anybody have any thoughts? And feel free to unmute.
Sapphire, this is Heather with Kansas Action for Children, and you're going to know where I'm coming from with this question, and I'm trying to figure out how much background to provide. What do you do when you are faced with someone who completely rejects that systemic racism exists in the first place? That's my question. What
Yeah.
do you do with that kind of person?
Well, the best place usually to start is the facts. We can't argue with facts. We can't argue with the gigantic body of research that shows that these health inequities have a root in racism. And so we have to start with the facts. And folks can deny opinion, but they can't deny facts. And so we need to educate one another, and we need to do it from a place of compassion. I am the first person to step on my soapbox and get upset about these inequities, but I'm asking you all to consider how triggering this issue is for everybody of all ethnicities, and to give grace, and to understand that it may be difficult to talk about it first. And so we plant seeds, we give information, we state facts. And once we're on the same page with that, we can continue the conversation in a more meaningful way. But we can't give up. We can't get uncomfortable and shut down. We have to keep pushing this. We have to keep it moving. The show must go on. If we stay static, then nothing changes.
Sapphire, this is Brenda, and I was wondering if you have a suggestion for a good entry point for someone where maybe these are new ideas and new concepts, or they're just beginning to learn about it. Do you have certain resources that you find are helpful? I'm thinking specifically for people like myself that might be just learning about this, that kind of thing.
Yeah, great question. So there's a book that I highly recommend everybody listening reads. It's called Medical Apartheid. I'm going to try to find the link. If one of you has the link to that book, please drop it in the chat. Otherwise, I will try to. I think it's important to understand how systemic racism works, of course, but how it works specifically and how it has intertwined with the history of the United States. If we can read literature like that and understand how a lot of these procedures, especially obstetric procedures, were perfected without anesthesia on enslaved Black women, then it gives us a new perspective, and it can certainly help us understand how we have arrived at what we have today. Also, you can visit the Wichita Birth Justice Society website, and we have some specifics on there. I think that it's important that everybody kind of gathers the resources that work best for them. There really is no shortage of books written on this topic. So I think just do a deep dive and figure out what resonates with you. Again, there's no shortage of literature on this topic. Medical Apartheid. It is, gosh, I don't have the author's name in front of me. Her first name is Harriet. I think it's Harriet Williams. But look into that book. And Harriet Washington, thank you. Thank you, Heather. Look into that book. That is a really good starting point. There is also a really great book called Birthing Justice. And if you type it into Google, it comes right up. It's been around for a while. Please take the time to inform yourself. And if this is an issue that you don't completely understand, or you feel a knee-jerk reaction when you hear about it, when you partake in conversations about it, then that usually is a pretty good indication that we have some work to do. I also am happy to be a safe space. If this is a conversation that you'd rather have one-on-one, reach out to me. I'm happy to talk with you about some of the experiences I've had in this medical system and what this experience looks like from the perspective of a person of color.
Sapphire, this is Jessica from Hayes Med, and we are out here in Western Kansas where we primarily care for white women, but our hospital does a lot of preaching and encouragement to do patient-centered care. And so I I guess I'm thinking that like probably personal racism, biases come into play, maybe when we're looking at patient-centered care, but like, is there things involved with this that kind of like education or information that, help in centering our care to what the patient's needs are? Occasionally we'll have people, in town that are, like students from the college or, workers from the college that bring in different ethnicities into our area. And I feel like our staff try to learn and grasp that, their needs and what their expectations are better. But do you have any resources or things that kind of would guide that?
So I would recommend that anybody who's looking to do work on recognizing their own bias in any kind of care, particularly with patient-centered care, that they really learn about cultural anthropology and that they understand how different worldviews affect everything about how we perceive the world. I think that really is, it's a deeper question than I could just answer with a couple of list of books. I think that it's important that we all keep an open mind and that we be receptive to what other folks are experiencing. And that's step one. Step two is understanding how that impacts how we're delivering care. And that's different from facility to facility and person to person. And so I think that's really difficult to answer for one particular facility, other than to say, you're out there in Western Kansas and you may not have the exposure to different cultures. And so intentionally exposing yourself and your staff to folks of other cultures and keeping your ears open and listening and understanding, I think that is step two. And there's no short, easy way around that. And I see some information going in the chat. Thank you for leaving those resources. Birthing Justice, thank you, Heather. I see Brenda dropped some in there. Those ones are wonderful. Please take a look at both of those. And I see a question from Jill, more of a comment than a question, but what can we do for those who argue or refuse to acknowledge that facts are facts? Unfortunately, right now in society, the validity of facts are up for debate. So that one's a difficult one. 2016, we stepped into the era of alternative facts, right? That's difficult. I think that we have to create bridges from culture to culture, from worldview to worldview. And the best way to do that is with compassion. We have to understand that sometimes people are willfully ignorant, but sometimes it's not willful. Sometimes they just truly have not learned to look outside their own worldview. And if we come at them in an aggressive way, they're never going to hear us. And so I think we just have to stay strong on what the facts are and really build a case for what we see around us. Again, there's no shortage of resources and research on this matter. And I also will add that there was a recent hearing in which a lawmaker really seemed to not grasp how systemic racism impacts health. I think that really is a learning point. I think that when you hear folks out here really spewing misinformation, that we all have a responsibility to write to that person. We all have a responsibility to stand in the truth and reinforce what the truth is. Because if there are 50 people over here acknowledging what the facts are, and one Lone Ranger over here saying that that's not what the facts are, I think that we really can make a strong case, a stronger case. when we all stand together and we all assert that racism is real, that this really is happening. We just have to stick to our guns. And we all need to know enough about this subject that if this conversation comes up, we can share the facts and we can do it in a meaningful way. Oh, yes, Heather, if you can find that link, I think that would be wonderful. Perfect. I see it on there. If you have time, I think it's important to listen to the exchange on the link that Heather has dropped in the chat box there, so that you can really get a perspective on what some folks think about this issue. Once you hear what they think, you will truly understand why it's so urgent that all of us who really understand what's going on stand up and decry people who are spewing misinformation, people who refute that systemic racism is a thing that impacts folks in Kansas. I know it's uncomfortable. I know that some people stand to lose a lot by standing in the truth, but I'm asking today that you do that every chance you get, that you stand in solidarity with folks of color in this state, who make up, by the way, 60% of the maternal deaths the last time the statistics were gathered, despite only being, about 15% of the population in the state. I'm asking you to stand in solidarity with us in asserting that these are facts, that this is truth. If enough of us stand up and say it, then they can't refute it. And we've got to keep doing that no matter how uncomfortable it is. Are there any other questions or comments? Well, I want to thank you for hanging in there with me today and being receptive to hear these stories, and for really just considering things from another perspective. This is really important work. And if I can be a resource to you, please reach out. Thank you all so much.
Sapphire, it's Tara. I just would say every time you talk, people get real quiet at the end. Have you noticed that? And it's not because they don't want to talk. It's because there's so much to unpack, is the word I think that people are using. But I would just tell you that, what stuck with me is I'm a visual person, is the Band-Aid. You put a Band-Aid on in medicine, literally and figuratively. And I think it's probably time that we talk about that. I think it's probably time. So great job. I knew you'd kill it. I knew you would do a great job. And I'm thankful for you. Now we're going to send everybody back into their work day. And I know what happens next. An intense self-evaluation. And the call to action from you is appreciated. Here's the plain and simple. Those of you that are on this call, there are 10 to 20 to 60 to 100 people next to you at your site or at your agency. And if we do nothing other than hear Sapphire, you've done an injustice not only to Sapphire, but to the women and the birthing persons that we stand for. So this is as important as cardiovascular illness, period. In fact, it's part of cardiovascular illness, right? And treatment and evaluation. So our job is to move forward, and our job is to act. Sapphire, thank you. I have no doubt that I'm going to be calling upon you again. So stay tuned. Stay tuned. Great job.
Thank you.
I'm going to close this out because I think, again, I can get a sense from my own brain and heart right now. I want to close with just our next steps in terms of learning forum and general meeting. My KFMC partners, I can't advance the slide. Can you guys do that for me again? There, perfect. This is just, again, you will get this in the slides. in about a week, you will get this recording as well as the slide deck, and all the resources that are embedded will come to you. This is just a note about some really great perinatal mental health training that's available through the KCC group, and the link is there. Registration is available. It starts next week. Next slide. And then this is the piece I wanted to make sure you also saw. Please mark on your calendars. There will be no learning forum next month, but yet more importantly, we'll be having our general meeting the November 18th from 9 to noon. Now what's clincher, and the information will be forthcoming, is that we're going to have the business meeting in the front end, and you'll want to be part of that. We're going to nominate and vote on some really important figures that are going to be important participants in the next step forward, but we'll also include some education for statewide agencies, not just fourth trimester folks. And then the second half of the meeting will be focused on our first trimester sites. So we want you to register when the link comes out. We look forward to seeing everybody there that's involved in KPQC work, not just fourth trimester sites, but we're going to hone in on some intensive work together as a state, and then as the fourth trimester initiative during our time together that day. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate it. And go do great things. We'll see you soon.